Good evening, everyone. Okay, Marlene Batista.
Present.
Chris Brogan.
Present.
Bryan Cafferelli. Jay Gross.
Here.
Pam Iacono.
Here.
John Mitola.
Here.
John Wynne.
Here.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Prue, are you hearing me okay?
I can now, yes.
Okay, thank you very much. And let's go to the Pledge of Allegiance then.
Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance
To the flag
Flag.
of the
United States of America,
and to
to
the
the
republic
Republic for
for
which it
which it
stands,
stands,
one
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 nation,
nation, under
under
God,
God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
with liberty
liberty,
and justice
and
for all.
justice for all.
All right, thank you. It's good to see everyone. I hope everyone had a nice Thanksgiving. The third agenda item is the informational item. As always, the public email comment is available at all times. It's posted on our CRC webpage that the public can submit comment through the email. And that's at crc@fairfieldct.org. And those emails are shared with the commission and with the public in the form of backup before the meeting. So moving along to agenda item number 4, approval of the minutes. I will entertain any motions.
So moved, Pam Iacono.
I believe, okay, and Mr. Mitola?
Yeah, I just wanted to make one change on the November minutes, November 8th minutes, 2021.
Okay.
On page, real quickly, on page 3, where it starts, my name, John Mitola. If you go to the middle of that paragraph, it reads, the charter states that the first select person can hire a town attorney, and maybe it becomes a term position and elected by the people. I never said it should be elected by the people, the town attorney position, and I would like that removed. Other than that, I'm fine with the minutes. So that I would make an amendment to delete the words "and elected by the people."
Is there any objection to that amendment?
No.
No.
Seeing none, we'll adopt that amendment.
Thank you.
With that amendment, okay, Chris?
Yeah, I have another comment.
Yeah.
Unless I'm misreading on the same minutes, further down in the section 6, I think it should reflect, we had a discussion about the preamble and the constable at the end of the last meeting. And I don't see that reflected in here. So I assume it was just missed. I have some proposed wording, if I recall it correctly. And that would be the commission discussed whether preamble should be added to the charter. Consensus of the commission that was not to add a preamble. And then secondly, the commission discussed whether provision for a constable in section 1.4a is required. Attorney Mednick will research this issue.
That makes sense to me. Did you get that, Prue?
I did.
Okay. Is there any objection to that amendment?
No.
Okay, seeing none, we will adopt that amendment as well. Any further comments on the minutes from either October 28th, November 8th, or November 16th?
Mr. Chair, I'd just like to make a comment
sorry.
that we have the October 28th minutes were approved at the November 8th meeting. So we're all set with those.
Thank you. And you know what? You had pointed that out too, and I was remiss in not remembering that. So thank you for reminding us,
No problem.
Marlene. Okay, so I would entertain now a motion to approve the November 8th and November 16th minutes as amended by
So moved.
these. Okay,
Aye.
it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Favor.
Any objections? Minutes are approved.
I'm sorry, who was the second, please?
I think it was, I don't remember. No, it was
I either
Chris.
moved or second. I'm not sure which.
It was a
Okay.
variation of
I'll
Chris
put-
and Pam.
Thank you.
Thank you. Then the next item is agenda item number 5, the election of 2022 officers. Pam.
I have a motion.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to move to elect Bryan Cafferelli Chair, Chris Brogan Vice Chair, and Marlene Batista Secretary.
I second them. I second that.
Okay. Thank you, Jay. Are there any other nominations? Are there any other nominations? Are there any other nominations? Seeing none, I will close the nominations for the election of 2022 officers and ask that we take a vote on the slate that was just moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any objections? Any abstentions? I'm kidding. So, well, congratulations, Chris, Marlene, and
Congratulations, Bryan.
Thank you. Yeah.
I don't know. I was hoping for a surprise there, I guess, but no such luck. I actually, with your indulgence, I would like to take the meeting schedule out of order.
Yes, please.
And talk about that before we get into the substance of the matter. Is there any objection to doing that?
No.
Okay. So does everyone have the meeting schedule that was sent around here? All right. So it looks like we have a meeting, 2 more tentatively for this month, and then going through every other Thursday in 2022, ending on May 12th. It looks like, what is that? So
Mr. Chairman, I
Steve,
think the 12:30 is off the calendar. I think when we had originally
right.
put that on, so I think we're supposed to be ending on the 21st for this year.
Okay. All right. And then for the following year, what is the 29th of April? I was meant to look at this.
That is a Friday.
It's apparently a Friday.
So
It's
who?
on there by mistake.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we're going to take that up.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes. Jay.
Could I suggest we go date by date to see if, who has issues? Because unfortunately, I've actually got issues with 3 of the dates, so.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I kind of want to do this quickly. So let's just talk about this year. So the 30th, we are all in agreement, is not happening, correct?
Correct.
Okay. The 21st, my proposal for tonight is if we get through the entire level set tonight, we don't need to have the 21st. But if we have to stop early, that's what we have the 21st for. Because, and my thought is that to have a public comment section on the 21st of December is not going to, there's not going to be a lot of participation and opportunity for the public to comment because everyone's so focused on the holidays. So I don't think it's probably the best time to have a public comment. And so therefore, if we could get through and kind of power through tonight to level set, to finish the level set, we wouldn't need the meeting, and we will only have that meeting on the 21st if we don't finish tonight. What are your thoughts on that? Anyone? John?
I think that's a good idea. I think it was our intent at some point, though, to have a second public comment session, so we would have to do that after the holidays,
100%.
right?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay.
As soon as the level set is done, we want to say to the public, here's what we've looked at, and kind of based on all your comments, here's where we're headed. What do you think? But and so yes, that is the intention, is to, as soon as we're done with the level set, to have a public comment. Maybe not the whole session. We could decide that as a group, maybe just the first hour of our January 13th meeting.
Sounds good to me.
Any other members have comments on that proposal? Steve, do you have any input on that?
You're muted.
Okay.
I'm fine with that.
Okay. All right. Okay. So that is our plan then for this year. If we can get
I think
through
Pam was trying to
Okay.
say something. Pam, you're
Pam,
muted.
you're muted. Thanks, Marlene.
I apologize. My question's about the 22 calendar. That's all. When you're ready.
I'm ready. Okay.
Okay,
So, and I
great.
think Jay was ready too. So there's not that many, so we can go through.
Well, I was actually hoping we could just adopt them as is. It's just some of us aren't going to be able to make meetings, and other, we're all committed to a bunch of things. So I think we should just adopt these. We still have a dial-in option, and, we can try and dial in. My question was, is the 31st of March intended to be a meeting?
I don't know. I'm going to defer to whoever. I can't remember if this was Steve or
No, this was
Me.
Steve that put this
Okay.
together, and this was at the very beginning at the
Okay.
at the original meeting, the very first meeting that we had. This was the
right.
proposed schedule from Steve.
Steve, is that intended to be a meeting?
It is intended to be a meeting. Take a look here. I was just trying to make sure that we had enough nights for meetings. So I would say that we should schedule it. And if we find that we're moving forward,
And we can cancel it. Yeah, I mean, I'm prepared to make a motion to adopt the dates as listed, in the presentation calendar.
Can
agree.
can I make one modification then? And so I would agree with that, Pam. And if I can't make, 2 of the dates, then fine. The only thing I would request we think about is the topic 3 meetings, because the subject of governance is so controversial. It would be better if we all attended all the topic 3 meetings, and I'm going to be out of the country, so it's not like I have a lot of control. So if we can just
Can I just say
modify
something?
that one, if we can modify that one date, then I think I'm fine with the other 2.
All right, Steve.
those are not locked in. The topics are not locked in. I put those down. I thought I explained it in the proposed work plan. That's kind of an order I developed, so we can address that, Commissioner, when we discuss the topics and how they'll break down.
Okay, what dates are you gonna miss then, Jay?
Well, but based upon what Attorney Mednick just said, I don't know, then I think we got to agree on the topic flow,
Yeah.
or we understand the significance of each of the dates. Because my point was,
We're never going to get
whenever
done.
the dates that the topic 3 meetings take place, we should all try and be there for those dates, whatever those dates are. And so right now, based upon Attorney Mednick's comment, I don't know when those dates are.
Okay, well, I guess I'm just asking, it seems like You're the only one who's saying that this schedule's not working and you're going to be out of the country. So how long are you leaving the country?
Different lengths of time. Yeah. All right,
Jay, will you be
so,
able to look? These meetings are recorded. Can you get caught up just by watching them?
I will do my best. I will do my
Okay.
Or
best.
could you log in from wherever you are? I mean,
Sometimes I'm literally going to be out at sea and underwater on a diving trip.
oh boy.
So it's going to
Okay.
be, so, but I can try and catch up when I get back.
Thanks.
Okay.
Arlene, are you?
All right.
I won't be there on the 27th, but I will catch up, so don't worry about that.
Does anyone else have any serious conflicts that we need to discuss, or are we gonna? Okay, John.
I have a couple of conflicts with Board of Finance meetings during the budget session, but I'm not going to ask you to move them. What I'm going to ask you to do is do not have a meeting on March 31st, because that's the vote for the budget that night from the Board of Finance, and that's the only thing I would ask you, not to have a March 31st meeting.
That's a good point.
I can.
All right. That we shouldn't do those things in conflict. You're right, John. So let's go ahead and strike that. I would be fine with striking that.
The other Board of Finance conflicts, I'll work around it. Don't worry about it.
Anybody else? John Wynne, we haven't heard from you tonight. How are you doing?
Doing well, thanks. I have a potential conflict on one date, but I think I agree with the premise that we will either work out conflicts ourselves or look at the meetings that have been recorded offline so that we can catch back up and jump in at the appropriate points. For me personally, I wouldn't adjust anything from my schedule.
Okay, Mr. Vice Chair, do you have any thoughts on this?
No, I'm in the same boat. I may have a conflict or two, but I think let's go ahead. And I think as time goes on, we can always, this isn't locked in stone. Maybe the first meeting or two is, but after that, if we see we need to adjust schedules for whatever reason, have more meetings, less, we can do it. So this is really just to get something on paper, I think.
Bring up a good point. So the other thing is that I've heard, and I've kind of, what do we feel about moving the meeting to 7 o'clock like it was originally intended? Pam, you're muted. Does anyone object to doing that? You can't hear me?
No, we can hear you.
Pam.
We can hear you. We can't hear Pam.
Pam, we cannot hear you.
Oh, sorry. Yes, I need to move to 7 o'clock, please. Thank you.
I heard from a couple people. So does anyone have any issue with that? Okay. So
I have one question, Mr. Chairman. Steve,
sure.
When we start scheduling some of these guest speakers, some of these, sorry, the word is just going out of my head. Experts.
Analysts, yeah.
No, the topic experts.
Subject
Are
matter
we
experts? Yeah.
the subject? Thank you. Subject matter experts. Are we going to be? I mean, how is this going to change the schedule? Because we have to work around their schedules as well. So, and I know we've got to get those started.
Yeah. Once I know what our schedule is, I'll start to put the panels together. I'm usually able to put together some pretty good panels with our fixed dates.
Okay.
Once we establish the dates, especially, I mean, frankly, Zoom makes it a lot easier. It's frankly, if no one has to travel, it's much easier to put panels together.
Okay. I'm fine with 7 o'clock. So.
Okay. So, what I'm hearing is that we're going to adopt this schedule for 2022 as proposed without the March 31st. And are we leaving in the Friday, the 29th?
No, I think we should take that out.
No, That
So
has
we're
to be taken
striking
out.
both extra Thursdays, for an extra Thursday and an extra Friday. So it would just be the nine meetings. We do not have a date for the second statutory public hearing or a final meeting. Do we need to put that in now?
I wanted to leave it flexible so that, you know, at some point we'll start talking to the Board of Selectmen, see where we are in the budget process. There are timelines that we have, but if everything is moving in a direction where we have more flexibility, if the Board of Selectmen doesn't need 60 days and they can do it in 40 days, that'll adjust when we actually end our process. So I prefer we just play that by ear and we can do it by special meeting.
Okay. All right. So then we're going to be adopting then the 2022 schedule meetings that are listed now, topics 1 through 9 on those dates. I don't need to read them. At 7 p.m. unless we change that at some later date. I will entertain a motion. Pam, unmute.
Unmute.
And I guess Pam.
I'll second.
I was just moving it.
Okay, and John Wynne seconded it.
John Wynne, I'm sorry.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any objection? Any abstentions? All right, that is our meeting schedule for now for 2022. So then to the heart of tonight's meeting, the discussion and action taking issues tracking chart and work plan, which is item agenda number 6, which was taken out of order. Steve, can you walk us through the documents that were provided and then give us some guidance as to where we're going to begin and end tonight?
I'll do that. And I hope, I'm sorry if I hope I didn't complicate things by sending out 3 documents. The first is just the upgrade of the grid. Since I sent it out, we got some comments in that came in on the from the public yesterday that I actually incorporated in. As we go through it, I'll raise those issues with you. Then what I did is I summarized the grid. What I tried to do is take, the grid is very wholesome and very includes a great deal of the commentary right from the members of the public and the people who have testified. And what I tried to do in the summary document, the summary of the grid, was to follow the order of the grid by article through the charter, but tried to thin down the concepts. And I hope I didn't do injustice to any of them, but I wanted to do that. And I thought that might be enough. But then when I realized that document still was 11 pages long or so, whatever it was, 11 pages long, I decided to try one other thing, and that was to lay out kind of a mock work plan. I thought it'd be helpful for me conceptually to see how I could group these concepts together, and that's what the third document is, which is called Proposed Fairfield CRC Work Plan, where I tried to group the concepts together that are in the thin down grid to at least come up with a conceptual framework for how we would move through this. And I apologize to the chair. I didn't want to appear to be presumptuous. And there's no agenda. The only item I would say there's an agenda on is item number 1, and I'll tell you why in a second. So I have no preconceptions on order and how to do it. I wanted to basically kind of lay out what I thought framework was. Now, that said, I didn't exclude anything. So everything that is in the kitchen sink remains in the kitchen sink. And so you as a body may want to look at some of these issues and say, we're not going to have time for that. And I'm going to tell you, this is a very, very extensive agenda. And so you may want to make some editorial decisions about what not to consider if that's what you want to do. If you want to consider it all, I will do everything I can to make sure we keep it within an appropriate schedule. As you see, I proposed 3 meetings for town governance because I think it's going to require every bit of 3 meetings. It may require more. the budget may require more than one meeting. We may have to schedule a special meeting for those things. So I did not take that into account. I just want to express that that may be a possibility if we don't do some paring down. The reason I recommend that we start with the budget, does everybody understand the documents? Are they okay from that perspective? I just want to make sure everybody was all right. The reason I start with the budget, and I talked to the chair about this the other day, is I think the budget is a good place for us to look at how the three major entities in the community work and on the major item of business for the year, the budget, how the first selectman and the board of selectmen, the RTM and the board of finance interact in that process. I think will tell us an awful lot about kind of the roots of governance and how the town is governed, how it works, whether there are efficiencies that could be effectuated after a discussion on the budget. And that's why I usually, in many of my communities, start with the budget. Again, that's not written stone. If you don't think it's the way you want to start, we won't start there. But that was the only one thing I wanted to say that I wanted to emphasize. I thought it's a good place to start. Governance, I wouldn't want to go much later, but we probably could. We take a look at Jay's schedule and try to figure out how we can do governance in a way that maximizes everybody's availability. But the one key one I thought we'd start with is budget. So that's my explanation.
Yeah, and I want to thank you very much for this. I think it's very helpful. I don't think it's presumptuous. I think it's a great place from where we can start. And it's organized in a fashion for us to do so. That is from the work plan document. And I will, and I agree with you, and we did speak about it, that's a good idea on starting with the budget, but with the caveat of, this is for the discussion of the group. And we can, open it up now to that discussion. So, are there comments on? Oh, sorry, Steve.
One other thing. Members of the public are going to continue to speak out. Elected officials will probably speak out. So there may be things we need to add as we go through this process. And as the public sees the subject matters we're discussing, you may hear more things as well during that process. So this process can be somewhat fluid.
Does anyone have any thoughts on, so I would like to get a consensus on tonight working from the work plan document. Does that make sense to everyone? Chris, you have any thoughts?
I think it does, unless I defer to Steve, unless you think there's an easier way of going through this. I kind of agree with his general point. If there are items that we quickly can get a consensus on how we want to resolve it, or whether we decide not to deal with it. If there's anything we can get quick consensus on, I think we ought to try and do that just to kind of narrow it down. And I don't know which document is better to achieve that end. Certainly the original list is, well, it's got everything on it, so that's, I would say, inclusive.
Everything is in the work plan, by the way. I didn't eliminate anything from the summary of the comment grid. Is exactly in the work plan, just in a different order. So everything is there.
John Mitola, did you have a thought? Okay,
No, I'm okay. I'm listening. Thank you.
Oh, Attorney Baldwin, how are you?
I'm well, thank you. Good evening, everyone. If I may chime in with my one thought about this is I think it may be a more natural segue to go from the budget process, then after that into town governance, and to have it interrupted by the miscellaneous issues may kind of detract from the continuity of the commission's discussions. But that's just my thought on that.
I have a thought too.
Okay. John?
So it seems to me that the meaty items are going to be the budget and as what Mr. Baldwin just said, the town governance. So don't you think we should start off with that? Just in case we need an extra meeting or two to deal with those issues. For me, getting through that is going to be the heart and soul of this whole exercise. And then the rest of it, yeah, I think the rest of it isn't as, what's the term I'm trying to look at, daunting, let me put it that way. So I think that's a good idea, the budget, and then into town governance, because that's going to take most of our time. And if we have some timelines, we want to make sure we get through that. So those are my thoughts.
Yeah, I would agree. I agree.
Okay. Pam,
Good.
you agree? How about you, Marlene?
Yep, I agree.
All right. Are there any, so we'll move that. So the town governance will come directly after the budget process and then kind of slide the miscellaneous in, I guess, after that. Is that what you're suggesting, John? Or, okay. Are there any topics on here? I don't think any topics as a whole should be eliminated. I think they're all, need to be addressed, but we're just going to go through each topic and see if we can weed out any areas in that don't need to be addressed. That's kind of my thought. Does anyone have any? Steve, please.
The only thing I want to say for the 13th of January, I have this category under drafting or research called organizational coherence. My hope would be with your support and acquiescence support that I have recommended. I have thought about, and I talked to Bryan about this, about taking a look at the structure of the document and seeing whether or not it makes some sense to see if we can reorganize the charter, even if we didn't change a word of the charter. I think there's been a kind of a general consensus that organizationally the charter is not as coherent as it could be, and I was hoping to get the go-ahead to have for you for the January 13th meeting kind of a restructured charter without changing a word of the charter. And I just want to make sure everybody felt that was a worthwhile exercise, because it will be somewhat time consuming. I thought I'd do it over the holidays, frankly. I wanted to take advantage. Once we get into the substantive items, that'll be a more difficult exercise to perform.
So I think that makes sense, but obviously want a consensus of the group. So does anyone have any thoughts on that?
John, it's Pam Iacono. I think you should do it.
Okay, John.
Definitely do it. And if we could start using it after you do it, that'd be even better.
That's the intent. That's why I wanted it for the first meeting.
And John Mitola, I think.
I'm okay with that. I'm kind of used to the charter the way it's set up now. So, but I'll that's fine. As long as we get that document that you're going to do, Steve, so we can, when we're referring to it, we're not flipping all over the place. That's all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a copy of my charter here with a bunch of notes on it. That's my point.
Sorry, so do I. We're on the same boat. But John, what I will, or Commissioner, what I will do is this will be heavily footnoted. So there will be a reference in every section I move. You will see this is a recodification of current section such and such. So you can, for a while, work with your old charter as we move into this.
And the intent, I would imagine, no matter what we come with at the end, is we're going to have a charter that's better organized, basically.
If you don't change a word, the objective is to have it better organized, and also to have it to have it annotated, because I have all the special acts. One of the things I will do as I go through it is I will try to mark the sections that are special act sections, but we don't see that readily as we look at the charter today. So I'll make sure that those are all noted. That's part of the project.
Thank you.
Chris?
Yeah, and maybe you're going to do this anyway, but as you go through, to the extent obviously that there's some people talked about some of the references to state law are wrong. Some things might be flat out inconsistent with state law. Some things like somebody mentioned, talking to the pension council to make sure the wording's straight. Personally, I'm okay. You go ahead. Obviously, as long as it's marked for our consideration, but go ahead and make what I would consider the legal changes to the document.
What I'll do on the first draft is I will note things that need to be changed for that purpose, because I want to have a baseline that I can work, that we can then start redlining against. But I will note those sections that need to be looked at. And I'll also note things that probably would be useful to have defined throughout the document as well for a definition section.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, anything on that? Attorney Baldwin, did you have any comments on that?
No, I think that you're on the right track. I think that's
okay.
A good idea.
All right, good. So that being
so
said,
are you okay with the other subject matters within the context of the budget? I think they're all relevant.
If I can make one comment.
Yep.
On the budget meeting, you have the speakers there. I think it'll be useful maybe to have people who want to be present. I guess we have to invite them so that we can allow them to speak. I wouldn't expect them to start out the meeting. I think since they've already had the opportunity and they've given suggestions. I don't know what your intent was there.
My intent would be, yeah, I really, very often my panels are made up of a lot of people from the other world outside of Fairfield. And I might include a couple in there, but I thought it would be important to have somebody from the Board of Finance, somebody from the Board of Selectmen and the First Selectman, and whatever, an RTM and whatever finance officials we should have as the panel to kind of walk us through the budget process. And maybe I would invite a couple of other people from RTM towns, you know, from whether it's Darien or Greenwich or other selectmen towns where you don't have an RTM, because you probably still have the dynamic with the Board of Finance. Some people who are, I think, are very, very skilled administrators to get their viewpoints on it. So it might be kind of an Uber panel where you would hear an awful lot that night. We're probably not going to be able to come to any conclusions, but you will at least get the data, and we'll probably have to do a follow-up session of some sort.
Yeah, what I'm thinking, I guess we just have to wait for the meeting, is in my back of mind, there's some things that are very charter issues, and there's other things that are very clearly, there could be problems today, but to me, there might be administrative issues that can be solved within or among the existing boards. And I don't want to, you know, it's fine to have a discussion. I don't want us to get bogged down in stuff that we really can't or really shouldn't be changing in a charter. That's my only comment. I guess we'll have to wait to see.
Well, maybe, and this is very useful, maybe the objective is to have the Director of Finance as an administrator talk about the process from the beginning to the end of the process, and then have the others invited to be there, but maybe have Director of Finance open so we have a sense of the line. I mean, obviously John Mitola knows it. Other people who serve on the Board of Finance, know these things, and then maybe have 2 or 3 people from out of town speak on their system with ideas that they might have for alternatives, rather than have a panel of our local elected officials. But I'll defer to the chair or to the commissioner.
Yeah, John Mitola, who is a subject matter expert.
And I know a lot about it, and I'll speak at the appropriate time. But my suggestion would be to have on the Board of Finance, for example, we have subcommittees, and one of them is the Budget Committee. And Chris DeWitt has been the chair of that committee for at least 4 or 5 years. I'd suggest that you invite him to that meeting. He will take us through, or take our commission through the budget process. Something that he's like the point guy every single year over the last 4 or 5 years. So that would be my suggestion. I mean, you can certainly have the director of finance, but the director of finance has only been at Fairfield for, I don't even think 2 years yet. So not that he shouldn't be part of this process, but you have a person, and Chris DeWitt has been on the Board of Finance for, I believe, at least 8 years. And a good chunk of that, he's been the budget guy for the Board of
I
Finance.
agree.
So do we feel comfortable that Chris DeWitt would be somebody who could take us through the linear process?
Right. Yes. And he can, yes, that would be my suggestion. Totally up to you and Bryan and what our commission wants to do, but that's my thought process there. Trying to be helpful.
Right.
I think that's a great idea.
Pam?
Yeah, I think that actually is a good suggestion. Chris has been running that budget and putting the schedule together for as long as I can remember. And then, honestly, I mean, I think John Mitola and I can fill everybody in on everything else. I don't think it's necessary to bring anybody else in on it. I mean, perhaps, yes, the finance director, it would make sense just to hear what, maybe because he is new, what he, sees as hiccups, but John and I have been around the block with Board of Ed, with Board of Finance, with RTM. We could certainly fill in the blanks there. And to his earlier point, or somebody's earlier point, I think maybe it was Commissioner Brogan, all the other elected officials have already been before us. I don't see a reason why to go back and do that all over again. That's why the first Selectwoman put on 2 elected officials to help you guys, help the commission fill in the blanks.
Wonderful. So we'll put Chris DeWitt as to kind of be our guide through the process, and then I'll put a small panel together of maybe 3 outside elected officials. I will give them the sections of the charter that we're going to be looking at and have them take a look at our charter and see how that works or corresponds with their charters. And I'll try to find people and communities that are relatively equal in size. I will not bring anybody in from Stamford or New Haven or Waterbury or Hartford. I'll try to find a town meeting or RTM communities where they have similar processes. And so that'll be terrific. And maybe we'll invite others to be there as observers. And if we have questions and want to ask them questions during the course of the evening, it might be useful. But that sounds like it would be a great panel. So thank you for your guidance on that.
So DeWitt, and we're also the finance director, right?
And finance director.
Yeah. Okay.
Where's
everyone
the finance director from? Did the finance director have experience in another community before coming here?
John?
He's from the state. He came from the state.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
So we'll jump over the miscellaneous and move to town governance.
So am I to understand from everyone here that they're good on all the issues listed under topic 1? Okay, good.
All right.
So yes,
Well,
take it away.
All right, we'll jump over and we'll come back. So on town governance, and I think that, I've scheduled 3 meetings, but it looks like there's a possibility of 3 or 4 potentially. Normally, what I try to do is, and I'll again use your guidance on this. For the opening night, I normally would have a panel. I've used Joe DeLong from CCM to talk about forms of government throughout the state of Connecticut, and I usually try to psych out what the big issues are. And so maybe we can talk about that a little bit tonight. And again, I don't want to presume anything. In one town that I recently did this, just to give you a sense of the methodology of how I do this, there was a strong movement to move toward a town manager form of government. So what I did on that opening night was had DeLong as a keynoter, and I'm not sure Joe will do it, but I'll check with him. And I had somebody representing a city that went from a town management form of government to a mayor council form of government. And then I had somebody who served in the opposite, a group that went from the in reverse. They went to the other form of government. They went from a first selectman to a board of selectmen to a town manager form of government. So one moving from town management into elected officials, and the other from an RTM or town meeting government to a council manager form of government. Would that be useful here? Do you want me to bring somebody in who is in a mayor form of government? Are you interested in hearing how town manager forms of government work? Would it be useful to have somebody from a town manager system? And then, of course, obviously a mayor council form of government as well. Or there could also be somebody from a board of selectmen and legislative form of government, either a town meeting or RTM, where there's no board of selectmen. So I have options to bring in different structures of government for you to listen to. I don't want anybody to infer that I'm pushing you in one direction or another, but would you be interested in hearing somebody who represents the different forms that we have in Connecticut? Would that be useful?
Jay?
Yeah, speaking for me, yes to all the above. I really want to have this well-rounded, broad, and open discussion because I personally think that that's the core issue along with the budget that we're going to be dealing with. So I don't want to leave any stone unturned or any option that we have knowledge about everything we're going to be evaluating.
And if I'm looking at a mayor council form of government, I will bring a mayor in from a city or town that's roughly the same size as Fairfield. Again, I don't think you should be compared to Bridgeport, although John Mitola tells everything about Bridgeport, or New Haven. I'll presumably look at a community roughly the same size as Fairfield, so that we're looking at apples to apples.
All right, we have John, Wynne, then Marlene.
Yeah, Steve and everyone, from some of the work the Strategic Planning Committee did, you raised a couple of the points. Town manager is definitely a topic that came up. Town council versus RTM, so the representative form of government that is utilized was a key point of discussion, and that's come up in several of the feedback that we received from the public and from the work that was previously done. But you didn't really mention kind of the distinction between town council versus RTM related to the representation of the people aspect of things. You know, the further refinement obviously is the mayor on top of or interrelating with the town council, and then the town manager, or in some cases they describe it as the chief administrative officer of the entity, of the municipality. So if we look at each one of those distinct slices, I would want to ensure that we are exploring what are the aspects of changes that would happen from where we are today with an RTM Board of Selectmen structure to that alternative form, whatever that composition might be.
All right. Let me just say, those are really, really good points, and I'll make sure that those are covered by the panel. But, you know, one of the things that when I'm looking at the RTM form of government, RTM is a step up from the town meeting. The town meeting, everybody gets to vote. Everybody gets to go to the town meeting. When you move to an RTM, you're not moving that far away from a council, because you do, and particularly in Fairfield, you have districts, they're fixed, they're elected for a term. No one could substitute for them. They are the legislative body. And so other than the name, RTM versus council, it's not a radical shift, just for the record. And again, I'm not trying to tell you should change anything. You could leave the RTM with the name RTM, and they could function as a legislative body every way a council operates. Yeah.
I fully agree, and
Yeah.
I'm fairly steeped in having researched this and analyzed it. But I also know that nomenclature is frequently important, and any change to nomenclature can sometimes get to be misunderstood and, you know, cause problems.
Oh, no, I'm saying it for just that reason. I think that you're dealing in an RTM system functionally with a council type of entity because it's a legislative body with fixed membership and fixed terms and fixed districts in this case. Yeah, so I'll give you those different forms to look at. I'm not recommending any changes in the names at this stage, but I'll make sure that there's a good representative group of 3 or 4 different structures that you can look at. I was also thinking about talking to a couple of academics. I know that there's a professor at Fairfield. I've already been in touch. It's my alma mater, so I was kind of have a week, kind of a week in the heart for Fairfield University. We might be able to talk to somebody there. There might be some other professors that I could talk to at one of the other universities as well to see if there might be useful things there. But I think that the mayors, the first selectmen, members of city councils, and members of RTMs and boards of selectmen really are the best professors. They're the ones who really know the ins and outs of these forms of government. So that would be the first and second, the first night and maybe the second night would be split up between those 2. At some point in that process, because it's so critical, you may want to have at least a portion of your meeting a public comment or public hearing component after these people speak and before you deliberate. I'm sorry, Commissioner has his hand up.
Bryan, can I just?
Yeah, sure. John Mitola, I think, has been waiting to speak.
So I think what you just said, Steve, is very important. I have absolutely no issue looking at these different forms of government and having presentations. And then I think right after that, we need to hear from the public. So far, I haven't heard from the public an overriding desire to change our town government. The one thing I think we've heard a little bit is that the thought that maybe the RTM is too big. But again, I think our duty as a commission is to look at these other options, and I'm all for that. And then right after that, we should hear from the public.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that the public will also be learning with us to the extent they're tuning in on FairTV. And again, thank you to FairTV for broadcasting this tonight, and on the WebEx. So I agree with you. I do agree with Jay's initial comment that let's consider all the options, and so kind of the more the better, and to see what we can learn from best practices across the state. So I look forward to these panels and experts and hearing about different forms of government and what they think works and what they think doesn't work about it, and what they would change if they had the ability to. So.
Okay. Are there any issues on those pages 4, 5, 6, and 7, that are not worthy of discussion at this point? Or the whole issue of appointing authorities, that'll be an interesting subject to talk to the different members of the panel about. Who appoints, how are they appointed? Does the Board of Selectmen appoint? If you keep a Board of Selectmen, does the first Selectman appoint? How do you go about doing those kinds of things? Those all fall into this. As you'll see, this section combines 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different articles of the charter. The whole issue of form of government and functions of the government are spread throughout the charter right now. So, all right, so I have a sense of what to do there. And let me just say one other thing. I will talk to the chair, the vice chair, the secretary, as I'm beginning to put panels together. I won't go off half-cocked and just come up with my best friends and most talented people I want to spend my time with. I'm going to try to come up with people I think that will be useful for you. So I will be talking to leadership throughout this entire process.
Well, I would also suggest too, if any members of the commission have thoughts on, people that Steve should suggest. I
Absolutely.
mean, Steve should consider for a panel, please, bring it up now, or feel free to email him directly or contact him directly with those suggestions.
Okay, so we've agreed that that is topic number 2. Do you want to go back?
Jay has a comment here.
Oh, I'm sorry, Jay. Commissioner?
So when I specifically look at Attorney Mednick, when I specifically look at the section on appointing authority, how does that, I don't know if this comment is appropriate here or elsewhere, but, continue to wrestle with what belongs in a charter, what doesn't. The one thing you said that kind of sticks in my head is the only thing you really need is the executive and legislative. Everything else is optional. So how do you decide? And consistently, we keep talking about the fact that we've got too many boards, commissions, they're too complex. So is this the place when we're starting to talk about appointment authority, where we start to talk about, does it really even belong in the charter? And if so, we just move it out? And
Well, appointing authority will be in the charter because it's usually a responsibility of the executive, either the chief executive officer, the mayor, the first selectman, first selectwoman. In your case, the Board of Selectmen has a number of appointments. And also in your charter, there are a number of people who serve on boards that get to serve on other boards. There's kind of a strange amalgam. My hope is when I restructure it, all those things will be in a place where you will see them, where we can make a judgment or decision about whether or not you want to put all of the authority in one person with an approval process. In the normal, in
so
many
regardless of how
communities,
many, okay, so this conversation is the appointing authority process or responsibility, regardless of whether or not you've got one commission and board or 100. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Never mind.
those kinds of things should be in a charter. How many commissions you have, how you want to deal with them is a different issue. But I will say this, and I think it was one of the commissioners said this, and I want to be careful about these things. You have a lot of elected bodies, and from my perspective, we have to see what you're going to be doing.
Right.
But if you start meddling with elected bodies, unless there's an important and critical reason to do so, my view is let's look at structure, let's look at process, let's look at clarity, and then you can make judgments about whether you want to start taking feathers off of people. And let's figure out how these things can be organized. But I think the issue of the number of commissions, whether they're in the charter or not in the charter, is a decision that probably falls, I think that, April 28th, boards and commissions. It's one of the things we will deal with later.
Okay.
But it will flow, Jay, it will flow from the decisions you make about who's going to be making appointments, I think. You'll start getting a feel for that.
Thank you.
My pleasure. So if we just go back to page 3, you'll see, and these are not minor issues, I will point out for the record, these miscellaneous issues, we have the editorial decisions, we have the issue of constables, which we brought up during the minutes, which you asked me to take a look at. And what I may end up doing with our agendas as we go through it, I may say to the chair, I've looked at this legal issue, do you mind if I put it on the agenda so that we can address it? So you'll see issues in here that are assigned to me that I will bring to you, especially if they're freestanding. I think constables is kind of a freestanding issue, and I will get you an answer as soon as I can. And I see Commissioner
Mitola, yes, John.
So, Steve, what I was going to recommend in the constables, can you hear me, is my understanding, and I heard this from one or two constables, is that they they do some work for a probate judge in probate court. And so I think you need to contact the probate court, because if you get rid of them, it might be more expensive for the town of Fairfield to have to hire a process server to deliver papers. So that would be my suggestion, to just clear that one up.
So
Yep.
can I ask a clarifying question on that?
Yeah, John.
John Mitola, you used the phrase "get rid of," and I know you didn't mean it in a negative way, but getting rid of it could mean we remove it from the charter, but we establish an ordinance that indicates that this is a role that provides value to the town, to the probate court, and it gets defined in an ordinance, and rather than having it defined and established in the charter. Is that correct?
But if we got an answer today that there's value in it, why would we put that burden on the RTM to create an ordinance when we get the answer today that there's value in having constables because they do work for the probate court? We've resolved the issue. That would be my point. And I'm not saying you're wrong either, but I'm trying to be as efficient as
Let me get
possible.
back to you.
That's all.
I'll get back to you and let you know legally what their status is. Right now, they're elected officials. Do they have to be elected? Can they be appointed? That would simplify things. It would streamline your ballot a little bit in certain elections if you don't feel they need to be elected. I think it's properly a legal issue that you can then make a determination on after I give you the data. Then we have the issue of minority party representation. I'll take a look at that. I know Jim Baldwin and I've talked
Jay
about
Gross.
that. I'm sorry.
Jay Gross.
Can I just make a,
Oh, I'm sorry.
so, yeah, I just wanted to make a comment. So John Mitola, Commissioner Mitola, so philosophically, here's where I'm personally coming from, is that there's got to be demonstrable benefit in order to keep something in the charter to tie up that decision for the next 10 to 15 years. Once you put something in the charter, it's in stone for the next 10 to 15 years. There's got to be a benefit, a demonstrable benefit to do that. If I can't see that, then I can't justify tying the town's hands for 10 to 15 years. So philosophically, that's what I'm wrestling with. Just as we go through these, just so you know, if I can understand what the 10 to 15 year benefit would be to tie up on any issue, and I'm not talking about constables specifically, but any issue, if there's benefit to tying the town's hands for the next 10 to 15 years, I'm all in. Let's put it in the charter, and it's in stone, and that's great. But I need everybody's help for me to personally understand what that benefit would be. And right now, when it comes to constables, I really don't see it.
Because, and I agree with you 100%, but what I'm telling you is you might be able to get that answer right away. So that's only my point. We need to look at it. I'm not disagreeing with you.
Fair enough.
I look at that as one of the issues I just described. As I will look at it and get to you, and we'll put it on an agenda as soon as I've got it. And so, because there's a lot of little things like that I will look at throughout the process and be bringing up to you to put on agendas as we move through to deal with some of the small issues. Again, an issue like that may be minority party representation. My hope would be to take a look at the sections, see how they align, see if there are differences and why are there differences for you to look at. The issue of districts, voting districts, should they be set by charter or ordinance? That will be a judgment call that you make. In many communities, they are set by charter. The number are set by charter. Reapportionment establishes the lines. And so we want to look at reapportionment. I have some language that addresses the issue of partisan deadlock. We will look at that. Whether we need a panel for that or not is another question. I think a lot of that can be dealt with some comparative data on how other communities do it. Again, some minor issue, not a minor issue, but there seems to be a specific issue regarding police and fire chiefs and the elector requirement. I assume that's something you're going to want to look at, but I have that in this particular session. So it'll be a pretty big session, about 8 or 10 different topics, but none of them are monumental, I don't think. So I think we should be able to tackle those in a session. Nonpartisan elections is in there. I will get you an opinion that that is not something that is open to us because there's no special act in Fairfield permitting that. The same is true for term limits for elected officials. I can either give you my verbal opinion, which I just did, or I can give you a brief written opinion for the record on those two issues. I know those are issues members of the public have brought up, and that other communities have them. And if they do, they have them because I talked to the town attorney in Westport. They have it in Westport because it's a special act that permits it in Westport. And term limits for elected officials, I argue the case at the Supreme Court, Simons versus Canty, that says you cannot do that. So, so those issues we should be able to resolve reasonably quickly. But a number of members of the public have brought them up, so that's why they are here. Is there anything else in that section that we need to discuss?
Just on the term limits point,
Yep.
You have it here for elected officials.
That's elected officials.
Does that carry over to appointed boards and commissions?
No, it doesn't, because the structure of boards and commissions, not elected boards and commissions, but of appointed boards and commissions, is really within the purview of the people who govern the local community. The issue with term limits is it deals with elective office, and there's no express grant of authority for either term limits or in our prior issue, nonpartisan elections for those elected officials. But with the regard to appointment of board and commission members, it is perfectly within the realm of responsibility for a municipal governance structure to regulate and administer those positions as they see fit. All right.
Sorry, could I raise one
Chris.
issue quickly?
I'm sorry.
No, I just raised. You reminded me of something that you said, I believe, earlier about, although it may not have been a comment, that the RTM, whether were following minority representation rules, and that depended on whether that was within the special act or not. Have you had a chance to figure that out yet, or is that still?
No, I haven't.
Okay.
In fact, Ms. Vice Chairman, one of the plans I have as I reorganize is to integrate the special acts and see which ones, how they correspond. So I have not done that at this point, but I will do it as we go through that process.
All right.
And I hope to have an answer pretty quickly for it. And then there seems to be varying standards, and I want to see why there seem to be, at least from the public perception, if you read the grid, there's a lot of concerns about the different types of minority party representation provisions that we have. So I will take a look, obviously, at all those. In most charters, there's one standard that governs all elected bodies and all appointed bodies. And it starts to break down a little bit when you do districts, but in the at-large context, I very rarely have seen a charter that has more than one standard.
Yeah. Thank you.
And one other point on minority party representation, I think I might have said this, and John Mitola probably knows this as a municipal lawyer, is that it's a misnomer. It's really a cap on majority party representation. So that if you are in a Republican town and you have a bare majority standard and you have 5 Republicans on that body, the other 4 don't have to be Democrats. They could be working families, they could be unaffiliated, they could be independent party, conservative party, taxpayer party, socialists, whatever it may be. But it's a cap on majority party representation. It's not really, so it protects minority parties to the extent that the majority party is willing to give the official minority party those seats. But it doesn't necessarily mean that all those minority seats go to the opposition party. A lot of people don't understand that. I wanted to explain that. It's the way the law works. Okay. Then the next issue is on page 7. These are department issues. This goes to one of the issues that Commissioner Gross has been talking about when we start looking at departments and we start getting to boards and commissions, is what needs to be in the charter and what doesn't need to be in the charter. And so as we go through these sections, and again, you'll see the repetition of this elector requirement and 6-month waiting period, with your permission, because a number of people seem to be in favor of eliminating it. Would you like to see some comparative data on how fire chiefs and police chiefs are dealt with in other communities? Would that be useful in terms of helping to make the decision?
It would to me, John Mitola.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. And and we get that information, it might be a real easy decision to make
Yeah,
and
Exactly.
get it off the table.
Good. I'll do that.
I like it.
The issue of terms of office, I think as we go through it, when I reorganize it, you'll see that there's variations in terms of office. The issue of qualifications, I have language that I use in charters. The way I set up department sections in charters is I have a lot of rules that cut across the border, cut across the grain. The theory that I try to establish, and again, I don't want to violate anybody's culture, but the theory I try to establish in a department section and a board and commission section is, here's the rules for setting them up. Here's the rules for how they operate. There should be kind of uniform rules across the board for how boards and commissions operate in a community. There are some boards and departments that you want to name in a charter that are so critical to the operation of the department, the operational, organizational positions like personnel, finance, the town attorney. Those are clear operational provisions of the charter. Does the development department need to be in the charter? Probably not. Does the charter need to make sure that development functions are mandated so that they will be included in a budget or in the ordinances? Yes. But what I try to do in those sections is to come up with general rules that allow for the creation of departments and the creation of boards and commissions, and kind of a uniform standard for appointment to those bodies and hiring of department heads. There may be variations. If some of your department heads are members of unions, then they have to be treated in a certain way, and the charter has to respect those appointments. But if they are simply appointments of the executive with approval by either the Board of Selectmen or the legislative body, then I try to recommend relative uniformity in those appointments so that it's just easier to follow and to know what the rules are. The other thing that I do or recommend is, if you believe there are departments, there are commissions that should be established, but you don't want to go through establishing them in the charter, then you simply delineate them in the charter and have them created by ordinance at a later point. To make sure, if you're moving something out of the charter, I normally recommend a sunset provision to move them into a sunset chapter in the charter so they don't go away. I think I told one of my commissions recently, the horror story. I did this in another town, moved 3 commissions, departments out of the charter. Thank God they're in a sunset provision. It was 8 years later. They haven't been created. So they still exist because they're in the charter until the ordinance is adopted. It's a provision I've recommended because being a former elected official, I know sometimes we don't pay attention. So I do that. So I just wanted to let you know, those are some of the thoughts that I have. And there's a lot of different people. There's some people who want to bring new commissions into the charter. There's somebody this week said we should move these commissions out of the charter. This is the area where you will start looking at departments. And then the next topic, I believe, is the area, where we start to look at actually the next one is first selectman and town attorney. But when we get to boards, topic 5 is boards and commissions. So those are the 2 the two big structural sections of the charter. Are there any other things on page 7 or 8 that you think? I'll take a look at that elector issue. It actually shows up 3 different times here. I didn't edit it down as much as I should. And there's thoughts about new departments. I don't know how, as we get closer to this, we'll talk about who we should bring in to discuss those departments. And maybe we have a philosophical discussion about what to do about creating new departments. The Commissioner Mitola has his hands up, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
John, sorry.
Steve, and maybe I'm in the wrong section. Are you gonna just see how towns deal with the town attorney? You're gonna get us some information on that,
Yep.
and whether whether if a town attorney is appointed by the mayor or first select person, whoever that is, whether that appointment is for a term of 4 years, something like that. I think we were going to look into that.
Absolutely. That's in the next meeting topic 4.
Okay.
I mean, this will tie in a little bit. Yeah. And I do have comparative data. I have looked at this issue before, John. So I'll be able to put some comparative data. I'll also, should I move into that next topic since the commissioners kind of nudged me there?
Well, let's just make sure that we don't have any other comments on this. Are there any other? Okay, yes, please.
Yeah, I mean, we also were talking about the chief of staff. I repeat the word chief of staff twice, and the CAO, and we want those in the charter. I can also give you, I've done a lot of comparative data on that. So I'll get you some comparative data on how town attorneys are treated, how chiefs of staff, how CAOs are treated, so that you get to see what you look like compared to other communities. Now, when you see that data, you will see some of the bigger cities, because it's the larger cities that tend to really define how chiefs of staff and CAOs operate. A lot of the smaller towns do not have CAOs, so you will see larger cities in that comparative data. Then the question we have, there is a question about eliminating or retaining the position of treasurer. I have some data on that. In fact, this week, just the opposite of what you're looking at, is we've now created a whole new chapter in the Hartford Charter for the treasurer of Hartford, because they have a very unique treasurer's function in Hartford. It really is a very substantial position, citywide elected official that has full responsibility for pensions. It's a massive undertaking, and we're finally recognizing that in that city. In Middletown, we just eliminated the treasurer. There was an elected treasurer, and it was ultimately determined that there was no reason to have an elected treasurer as long as you have the function served by the finance director or somebody in town. So we'll take a look at that as we get closer to that issue. That's it on those department issues. That may be a meeting that we could combine. Qualification standards. In general, in the department heads, and I have it in this section, again, this is not a perfect document as I'm seeing as I go through it, is what I try to do with qualification standards is in the charter to establish a best practice standard and to leave it to the personnel director to make determinations about what the best practices are. Because if you establish a standard that, in some charters, your corp counsel has to be a practicing attorney for 10 years. That may make sense. You may want to have that in a charter, that you want to have somebody heading up a corporation of this size would have sufficient experience. But if you want to start getting into more details about what that person's background should be, that should be more in the realm of a personnel decision as opposed to a constitutional decision, because those things can change from time to time. So you may have an experience standard for a given position, depending on the critical nature of the position, to make sure you have somebody with sufficient, if not gray hair, but sufficient duration in their profession or their business. But in terms of the actual standards of what they should be, unless it's absolutely critical, it probably shouldn't be in your constitutional document. Just a general rule of thumb that I have. Should I move on to the next topic?
Yes, please.
So this is boards and commissions. I kind of.
Oh, wait, actually, sorry if I can interrupt 1 second. So the speakers for that, does anyone have any thoughts on that? We're gonna, again, for the department issues, we'll hear from, you're proposing just the first selectman, town attorney, and CFO? Are we gonna hear from?
Yeah, no, this was just rough justice. Under the speakers here, what we might look at, if the comparative data is enough, I don't think I need to bring corporation councils in from around the state to talk about this. But we could, we may not need speakers at all for this, to be honest with you. I think a lot of this will be data driven. And if we do need speakers, you know, we might want to have a speaker on the roles of chiefs of staff or CAOs or anything like that, if we think that's an issue. But we'll make a decision on that closer.
Okay.
You know, I don't feel that you need to have panels for every meeting, for the record.
Correct. Yeah. Please, let's continue. I didn't mean to.
That's okay. No, it was great. I forgot that I actually put that in there. And then boards and commissions. Again, some of the general standards. What are the defined roles? Should there be qualification criteria with respect to appointments? Now, that could work both ways. It could work for, you want to make sure you have diverse members on your board of education is elected, so that would not be a good example. You want to have a diverse membership of most boards and commissions. You want to have geographic diversity. You want to have, obviously, minority party representation, political diversity. You want to have racial diversity. You want to have all sorts of diversity, but you may also want to have occupational and background diversity. And so I usually have provisions in charters that kind of lay out those things so that the appointing authorities can look at them and say, you know, we don't need 4 lawyers on the planning board, or it's an elected board. So one of your appointed boards, you don't need 4 lawyers. Why would you have 4 lawyers on that? Or you may want to have somebody with a business background on a development group, but a business background of a business person who's not going to be developing in Fairfield. Somebody who works in New York by day and lives in Fairfield by night could be very, very useful. So those kinds of things. One of the other key provisions I throw into charters, I don't know, I'll have to go through, we'll see if it's there, is a cooperation provision. It's absolutely critical if a board or commission is attached to a department that you have cooperation that works both ways. The department has to work with the commission, and the commission has to work with the department. And you can't have stonewalling. You really need an ability to have somebody enforce the cooperation if the parties are not cooperating. So the town attorney would lay down the edict, or the first selectwoman would lay down an edict that you need to provide information between these bodies. And I guess the big question becomes, how do we deal with some of these issues? The status of the Conservation Commission. We don't have to resolve this tonight. Public Works, Town Planning and Zoning, the roles of the Wetlands Agency. Should it be separate? Should it be part of the entity that it's part of? We need to think about those things. And again, one way to look at it is comparative data, but we also may want to talk about local experience to see whether or not there's reasons to change them, keep them the way they are, and whatnot. Somebody had actually, so there's a whole series of issues here, and you know, are all of these boards or commissions, I'm not talking about the elected ones right now, but the appointed ones, are they all filled? Are they all working? Are any of them bodies where people are not attending meetings, where you have consistent vacancies and consistent quorum issues? Would there be a need to consolidate? So that's something we may want to look at as well. In Hartford, we found out as we started going through this issue 2 weeks ago that they have 17 boards and commissions that haven't met quorum in a year and a half, a year, 6 months, 9 months. And so my view on that was, then why are they here? Why do they exist? And so one of the provisions we're considering in Hartford is to have a sunset provision for boards and commissions that are not charter commissions. So if a commission is established by ordinance, there would be a trigger for a sunset if they don't meet for 2 years, for example, or if they don't have quorum for 3 years or for 6 months, or some standard to establish a way to eliminate the commission if it's not meeting. Why should it remain on the books if it's not an active, vibrant entity? And so this is a section, going to Commissioner Gross's point, that you may want to look at and decide, are there any of these boards and commissions, rather than putting boards and commissions into the charter, are there boards or commissions that should be either mandated and established by ordinance, or just eliminated from the charter and let them live or die based on the relevance that they have to the community in a contemporary setting, so you don't have to wait 10 years to get rid of them. So that's kind of the broad decision that I think you need to make when you get to this section.
Okay.
And the last items were really what I call the other issues. Standards of conduct. I will look at it. I think your standards of conduct is actually a pretty good section. A lot of charters say, let's create an ethics commission, and that's all it says in the charter. And I don't think you should have your ethics code in the charter, but I think you should have the 10 commandments of ethical standards in your charter. And then you create it by ordinance. I think you already kind of do that. I don't know if there are any issues with referenda. One person said the manner of holding referenda is confusing. I don't know that that is the case. I'll leave it to you guys to decide whether that issue needs to be elevated in any way, shape, or form. And I believe the issue of seal, we have to fix that section to make sure it's not implied that you need to go to a town meeting. There is no town meeting to change your town seal. But I'm not sure we're going to do anything else on that. That's more of a mechanical issue. I think that's it.
So, just a follow-up question on that last point about the town seal. It's interesting. When I was first appointed to the commission, I had comments from 2 different people: don't change our seal. And someone else said, our seal needs to be changed. And I won't get into the explanation as to what either person's thoughts were, but why does that even need to be in the charter? Something about the seal.
It doesn't need to be. I went through that. I looked at that issue. It's a statutory issue. And I looked at it. Most of the references to seals and charters throughout the state of Connecticut says the town clerk shall keep and protect the seal of the town. And I assume they're talking about, steel on a piece of paper, not an animal, not a mammal. And so that's the reference I see. So I think there's a statute. I'll defer. I think Jim Baldwin, I've talked about this. I think it's a statutory provision, and I don't think it needs to be in the charter unless there was some special act power that you had with regard to it. I'm not sure it needs to be in the charter. Again, I'll look at that definitively, but I think that the way it's framed, it's a little misleading. That's the only thing I would say.
Okay. A follow-up question on a point. Thank you for that explanation.
My pleasure.
A follow-up point on a question that was way back on page 7. I did not want to disturb your flow in taking us through this material, which has been very helpful. But if you go back to page 7 under Article 8, elected boards and commissions, item 8.3D.
Yeah.
Installation of assessment system by the Board of Finance. And maybe I could leverage a little bit of Commissioner Mitola's experience and thoughts on this, but that topic has come up in several different conversations over the past 2 years or so, dealing with the topic of the word system, I believe. Installation of an assessment system by the Board of Finance. And I think it's an old and dated term, but I think the basic premise is, and maybe it's not well defined in the charter, the role of the Board of Finance in management or managing and involvement in the assessment process. So that I think if you change the word system to process, the Board of Finance maybe has a role in the management of the assessment process, and that could be better defined. But I just was curious about people's thoughts on that topic, because it has come up several times. It's been confrontational. We're coming out of a reval time frame, and I'm curious how we go about defining what the role of the Board of Finance is in managing that process, so it's well understood, well articulated, so we manage it in the most effective way possible. John, do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think we need to look at that, and I think, John, what happened was, this language has probably been around a long time. I may be not saying this the right way, but when we do a reassessment, the assessor contracts with an outside organization to do all that work. And for a while, the Board of Finance was out of that loop. But the question is, should we really be in that loop, if you follow what I'm saying? Because we really rely on the assessor to retain that professional to do that type of work. So I guess my point, John, Wynne, is you're right. We should look at this and clarify it. And I think some input from other Board of Finance members would also be helpful on this.
Okay.
I think years ago, the Board of Finance was involved in it in some fashion. And Pam may know more, may add something to this also.
Yeah, Pam.
Yeah, Pam Iacono. I don't know for certain, but to John's point about the technical thing, this might have literally come down to like system, like whether or not you were doing the field card assessment or whether you were doing the knock on the door assessment. It might literally be that antiquated. That could be what that is.
Well, yeah. The word system is frequently used in systems analysis, and that's typically process analysis. So I think the intent was the Board of Finance has a role in the assessment process that the town utilizes, and forgetting about the word system and the hardware and software and all that other stuff. It's just to ensure that this critically important financial process in the town has been well defined and has a level of oversight by the Board of Finance, is what I would think it would be.
And John, the assessor has come before us to describe the process of how they're doing the assessments, who they've retained. There is some oversight from the Board of Finance with respect to that. And if I remember correctly, we've actually had the companies who have done the work come before us and explain their methodology, what they did, so on and so forth. So there is some Board of Finance oversight over the process.
Okay. And I agree, but it seemed to me like it was being driven more towards the system question, and that's really not what it's directed at beneficially doing. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
It definitely needs clarification.
Okay.
Right.
All right. So, Steve, I think that we've kind of worked through the whole proposed work plan then, right?
Yes, we have. What I'll do is I'll reorganize it, try to clean it up a little bit, get it out to everybody to look at, and we'll start organizing our first meeting. I guess the decision you need to make is, for the calendar purposes, is that meeting, our first meeting in January, should be part public hearing? Or should
Yeah,
it be all public hearing? Do we want if the public doesn't like what we're doing, are we going to change something? Or do we want to start in on the budget at that same meeting? That's the question I have for our next meeting on the 13th of January. I assume we're not meeting on the 21st since we got this done.
that was the deal. So I'm going to honor that, unless
All right.
Pam has something monumental to say.
No, I was just going to ask could you just repeat what's the intent there for the public input session? I missed that, I'm sorry.
I'll defer to the chair. I think that the chair wanted to have the public have an opportunity to look at our proposed schedule.
Yeah,
okay.
Not just me, but I think that we had, as a group, come to a consensus that this is what we were going to do after we had all of the input and then had our level set meeting, was to check back in with the public. And
Mr. Chairman, is the intent then that they would comment on this work plan that we just put together?
Yeah, and say,
Okay.
Why are you looking at this, or why aren't you looking at this, or good job. Hopefully everyone chimes in and says, you guys are doing a great job. Thank you for your service.
Gotcha. So
that's what I'm intending to hear.
So it would be marketed as, we've put together a proposed work plan. Please review the work plan. If you'd like to come and comment on our work plan, we're taking your feedback.
Yeah, and look, if the group's thoughts have changed since we last discussed this, that's fine. We can certainly have that discussion now. But I would think, my thought is that open it up to the public for the first hour, and if it takes that time, it does, and if not, then just go right into the budget.
Yeah, I mean, I think if we're sticking to this work plan and they're going to comment on that, I think that's productive. What I wouldn't find productive is for another session where everyone comes on and starts getting in a tizzy about stuff that we're not even talking about.
Oh, no, yeah. I would agree that we would frame
that
it
was
as...
not helpful to the commission, in my opinion, nor the members of the public themselves who were getting all tied in knots about things that weren't even necessarily ever going to happen.
My takeaway from when we discussed this was that we would flesh this out and come up with a document that looks like this, which is great. And as soon as Steve revises it, we'll circulate it and post it and say, here it is. If you'd like to comment on it, please join us on the 13th from 7 to, set 7 o'clock.
Yeah, I would agree.
That sounds good.
Yeah,
Jay?
Yes, I would agree to keep the public comment section or time focused on the work plan, so that we can have a productive session and move forward. And if it needs to be policed, then obviously, Mr. Chairman,
I'm happy to do that.
You do that.
Yep.
Thank you.
Anyone else have comments on that? Do we generally agree with that, Mr. Vice Chair? Do you?
Yeah, I'm good with that, with the qualifications we put on it. Yeah.
Okay. And then Steve will set then the following 3 dates for the form of government discussion.
Yep, I'll reorganize that. I'll clean this up in a more readable and coherent version than what you have in front of you right now, which is not bad, but there's a little inconsistency in it. So I'll try to fix that up for you to take a look at before we publish it.
Right, and you have a few new comments you got in, I think, the last couple of days too, right?
There are. Do you want me to go over? I mean, there's nothing radically. I'll go through them because I actually highlighted them.
I thought the one from Ms. Griffin was good in the sense of the detail she went into with some very specific suggestions in that sense.
And they're very specific. I mean, but one of them was eliminate the term limits for appointed boards. Right. Another was remove boards and commissions from the list that report to the first selectman, Selectwoman. So she had an idea there. These all form within areas that we have. Make the board assessment and assessment appeals and ZBA appointed board. So I will add these into my final version, but I highlighted them. It was not in your version of the tracking chart. I just got to it today because I just got them yesterday. define the Harbor Management Commission, things like that. What does otherwise stipulated mean? I'll answer that. Those kinds of things. How the majority of boards and commissions appointed by the RTM. That's a new concept and a new idea that really didn't show up. So those will move. I'll move those into the final version of the work plan.
Okay, thank you.
And then, so you're going to revise the work plan, but the schedule that's going to be published, then will that have topics on it?
No.
Okay. So we'll just.
No, I think we just have to give the dates to the town clerk for our regular meetings. We could then set our agendas under FOI.
And we will though, Marlene, I think we do populate the subjects into the schedule to the extent we can, right?
I think that would be the preference.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh, I'll do that informally for us, but not
right.
For...
But we'll put it on the website, though. I think is
yes,
what I'm
absolutely.
saying. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Once everybody's okay with what I give them, yes, absolutely.
We have to change if we need to, but we do need to put something.
They're all subject to change. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. But I think it's helpful for the public so they know what's coming up rather than just the meeting date. And then I just wanted to discuss one other thing too, is that there had been mention of a second public discussion after we got through town governance. What does the commission feel about that? John Mitola.
Yeah, I think we need to do it.
I do too. Okay.
Yeah, I think it's essential. It's essential.
But do we need to set that meeting date right now? We should just keep it open and pick a night we can do it.
Right. No, I know, but I just wanted to put it on our radar, kind of like we did about post-level set, that we, and for the public that's listening, that we will again check in with the public after we discuss town governance. So you're not.
If you look at the beginning of the work plan, I actually had it set up as the last of the meetings would be public comment before you as a commission discuss everything you've learned.
Oh, got it. Okay. Well, there you go. Missed that. Thank you.
Yes.
And someone else had comments. Oh, John Mitola. No. Please go ahead.
So, Steve, you've done this for many years, and I guess it's more of a general philosophical question. How important is it for this commission to be, for lack of a better term, unified on any items that we may eventually suggest be changed in the charter? I mean, is it, if you have 4 of us who agree to do something and 3 who don't, does that matter? I'm curious what your thoughts are with respect to that.
Yeah, I work very, very hard to try to make sure that my commissions work together politically.
Okay.
Where you have strong parties, I really encourage everybody to work together. Where you have a dominant party, I always encourage, sometimes to my detriment, that you include the minority party that's a subordinate party. So if you're in the big cities, it's usually the Republicans who are a weak sister party. I work very, very hard to make sure that they are part of the majority. Not of the majority party, but part of the majority solutions that we work with on charters. And I usually argue with majority parties that think about your friends in Wilton. If you're a Democrat, you want to make sure that everybody gets treated fairly under a constitutional document. And so I work very hard to do that. Sometimes it's unavoidable. And the 2 commissions I'm working with this year, we'll see as we get to the substantive issues. Last year was very political in both my commissions, partisan political, national partisan political, and I've never witnessed that in all my years doing charter revisions. In one town, when the issue was resolved, everybody was fine. In another town, it got very, very nasty, and I was beyond my capacity to ultimately resolve it. It was actually killed by the by the council in a very political vote. But I work enormously hard to make sure that we avoid narrow one vote majorities. And I think, let me just say, if you're talking about your form of government and you come out of this with a 4-3 vote on a change of a form of government, that will be reflective in the electorate and the outcome in November. So remember, this is not your decision. You're making the first decision, the Board of Selectmen makes a second decision, but the final decision is by the voters. And I ask the elected officials and the appointed officials to lead by example. And this is your constitutional document. Let's see what we can do to achieve substantial majorities. It doesn't mean anybody should feel stifled if they disagree. And it doesn't mean you shouldn't do the best you can to persuade somebody that they should go in another direction. But in the end, it'll be the chair's job. And I will work with the chair very hard to make sure that we find ways for people to come to substantial agreements.
Yeah. Hey, John.
Thank you for.
Yeah, John, I would agree with you. Regardless of party, any simple majority vote, we wonderful if we were unanimous, but if we can at least get to a super majority, especially on the big issues, I think that ought to be the objective we work towards. So regardless of party, right? I would agree with you 100%.
Yeah, well, I whatever comes out of this commission, I want to support it, and I think we all do. So,
Yep.
Right.
But I think we all would agree that some of us may not support something that we just don't honestly and sincerely believe is in the best interest of the town. So that's all. But I appreciate, Jay, what you just said, and Steve, thank you for that response.
And that's generally what commissions, people who go on charter commissions tend not to be highly partisan. They tend to be interested in their communities. And that's been my experience, again, with one exception, one real exception that I've dealt with.
Well, let's focus on the other successes then, Steve. Let's not talk about that exception anymore.
Oh, no. That's every 10 or 20 years, you're only a year away from that. And by the way, they just voted this week to do it again.
Okay, good. Hopefully you have new people.
We're going to try to fix that mess.
Yeah. I think we've been going along at a good clip. So, I don't expect any major dissension. There's no real indication that's where we're headed. So I have faith that everyone, as I have, is opening, has an open mind and will kind of listen. And I'm really kind of in a nerdy way eager to learn about a lot of this stuff and how other people do it. And, maybe, it's just like some aha moments of like, oh my gosh, why didn't we ever consider something like that? So hopefully we can all do that together and, grow and come to consensus. But it was a good question, John. And I'm glad for the most part Steve answered it that way. What else do we have to cover tonight, Attorney Mednick? I think we're nearing the end, huh?
I think that's it. You can go ahead to do the reorganization. That was a big item for me, so I'll start that.
Okay, I think John Wynne has something.
Sure, Steve, just one quick observation. Your notes on each of these documents, your introductory note is very helpful to focus the reader on the content they're reviewing and understand what it is and what it isn't. We don't have one of those on the issue tracking chart, so it might be sensible to put one there, especially as we're going to get more people from the town to be reviewing it. If you reorder the existing charter, I think it's critically important to do that there as well, because people might think, oh, this is the new charter and what's just, clarification is good.
I'll do it. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Do any other commissioners have issues they'd like to discuss before we begin the ending of this meeting? Pam.
Since we're talking about calendar and dates, at what point do we check in with the Board of Selectmen? Like, when does that normally, like, how does that line up, I guess? I know we don't schedule it now, but where do you think that would be a natural break?
Well, I think that as we're going through topics, I think that the leadership should be talking to the Board of Selectmen, the first selectwoman. The town attorney is on these calls, and so we know that he will be fully informed. But I think as we begin to go through processes and are beginning to formulate positions, I think you'll want to check the temperature of the Board of Selectmen to make sure that we're headed in a direction that they're comfortable with, or that you need to use your persuasive abilities to have them become more comfortable with your ideas, or you need to be more comfortable with the direction they're going to take. At some point, that's really important. Again, going back to John's comment about super majorities, you also, while you're an independent body, you are also have to be mindful that you need to get this through the Board of Selectmen.
Right.
And so I think it's really important throughout the process to just keep the doors open, keep the conversations going, and formally and informally. And but we're a little bit away from there. I mean, I think you know, we'll see what happens in the budget process. If there's any need for structural change, obviously you're going to want to talk to everybody who's involved in those areas, and that's where you'll probably first start to have some unofficial dialogue.
Thank you.
Anybody else? All right, well, I just want to say to Steve and Prue and Jen, you know, again, thank you all for all your help. This is, you know, couldn't be done without you, and we really appreciate this. And happy to have, you know, achieved the work that we've done so far, and I'm like excited to get going on the work. So that's going to be our next meeting, January 13th. So I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Anne, Marlene, been first and seconded. All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Hey, everyone, have a happy holiday and happy New
Merry
Year.
Christmas, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Enjoy.
Bye-bye.
Happy New Year. See you later. Bye-bye.
There you go. Happy Hanukkah, Jay.
Oh, Hanukkah's over. It's over.
Yeah. Oh, he had the cup up, so I see you guys.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye.